Okay, Barbara, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you to you and Rebecca and all the people who have put together the Two Books, Two Communities programs. I think it's a wonderful tradition that you seem to have had for several years now, and I'm really honored to be included in it. I am a native of Michigan, and I was born in Detroit, but spent most of my childhood in the suburbs of Detroit. But a very special part of my life was each summer we would go up north. And that included both the upper part of the lower peninsula and into the upper peninsula as well. And those were mine and my family's favorite times because there's just something very, very special about this part of the state. And it's my dream to go back when we can all be together. So I hope that we can meet in person someday. When we were up north, when I was a child, one of the things I loved the most was that we had no television. This is way before any other kind of electronics. But it meant that in the evenings, we had to figure out ways to entertain ourselves. And a lot of times I heard great stories from my parents. And I loved hearing stories about what their lives were like when they were younger. I would call it in the olden days. And for some reason, I was just really fascinated by it. I mean, a lot of kids don't seem to like history, but maybe it has to be the story that you hear rather than the fact that it's history. And for me, I really was hooked. And I love to think about how people used to live, and I would hear details about how hard it was. My mother was born in Calumet, so she had strong memories of what it was like. My grandmother would tell me stories about how the winters were just unbelievable. The snow had to be, they had to dig tunnels to get through the snow. And I just thought it was the best thing I'd ever heard. So I was an early lover of historical tales. Now, in those cases, most of it was true, but I did go on to like it as a whole genre. And Sarah, we have a slideshow too. Should we start that? Because the other thing I'll say is just that I've been an educator most of my life, and I worked in educational media, and now I'm on my third career as a writer, and it's been a really nice opportunity to take a lot of things that I've enjoyed doing in my professional career and putting it together. So I thought we will share a little something with PowerPoint here. I think Sarah's going to put the slides up, right? Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about how I started to write the book. So let's see, next slide, Sarah. So I think I had mentioned that I loved hearing one writer's journey. So a blank page can be a terrifying thing. And I'm not sure anybody sits down and says, I'm going to write a book today. But the way it happened for me was when my parents started telling me stories, next slide, they stuck in my head. Now, my dad was a great storyteller of fantasy, but my mother was a great storyteller of the olden days. So when you grow up hearing stories, I think they just become a part of your world. And so I wasn't as afraid of writing down what I had heard. And if any of you are aspiring writers, that's a good way to get into it, because rather than making things up from nothing, you can start with things that you've heard. So that was one little seed in my brain. Some of the books I read as a child really also influenced me. I loved books about families. All of a Kind Family by Sidney Taylor, all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. Those are some of my early favorites. Next slide. And so when I got to college, I naturally was sort of attracted to studying history. I became a history major. And my senior year of college, this picture is not from my era, by the way, but it was a stock photo I could find. My senior year in college, I was assigned a history paper that had to include primary research. And that means from an original source. And the university I went to didn't allow undergraduates into the graduate library where all the good stuff was stored, all the primary research that I was thinking about. So I was complaining to my mother and I said, what am I going to do? And she said, would you be interested in your grandfather's scrapbooks? Next slide. And I certainly was interested. I sat down with those scrapbooks and I looked through these treasures of information that contained my grandfather's life. And he was an amazing man. He had been born in a small village in Croatia, and he came over to America with his mother. And this is how the story sort of started to lodge in my brain. I was so impressed with how hard they all worked and how difficult their lives had been. So I still have these scrapbooks, which I refer to from time to time. But that was the start of being aware. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So that's my grandfather in his later years. He was one of 13 children, and all of them went to college or some kind of post-secondary school. He became a lawyer, a judge, and he served in the Michigan state legislature as well. And I'll show you the house where he was born, and it just really made an impression on me on how hard he worked to achieve his goals. So let's see, let's go to the next page. This is the house where he was born. And I went to Croatia and I saw this house, and it looks quite similar even today. There are still relatives living there. And it's a charming area. It's just a beautiful area. There's the house today. And, I just thought, the reason they left was because they were so poor, they couldn't afford to feed the entire family on this small farm. And so, next picture, please. So this was my great-grandfather. He was sort of chosen or volunteered or was pressured into going to work in the copper mines of northern Michigan in order to send back some money for his family. And so as I heard more and more, I became more interested in other family members, and I attended a family reunion one year in Calumet. And next picture, our slide, please, Sarah. And one of my cousins led me to find this article that had been written in the Saturday Evening Post. And it was written about my great-grandmother. Really focused on her more than anybody else in the family, but it talked about everybody. And this article had a lot of really, really rich details that filled in a lot of spots in my research. And it just really came to life for me. So as I was researching, I just kept going, and I'm thinking, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with all this information. Next slide, please. So I found out more about dates, and the dates were kind of important for me to get a frame around my story, because even though my mother had a great memory and she knew a lot, some of her dates weren't exactly correct. But I found this a record in the ship's registry. I had a kind of range of dates, and I finally unearthed the fact that I got her name, my great-grandmother's registration, my grandfather's name verified. And I've realized that they had sailed from Bremen, Germany. You can have the map, please. So there's a map in the book, and if you have a book with you, I don't know if you can see that right side because it might be cut off, but Croatia is right next to Italy. And so I had assumed that they would travel down through the Adriatic and around Spain. But in fact, they had to go overland to get up to Germany, and they left from a port in Germany and then sailed across to New York. And then from New York, of course, they had to go all the way up to the Upper Peninsula. So it was no small effort. And I was really in awe of my great-grandmother taking this on, because my great-grandfather had gone ahead. And then when he developed an eye disease, he had someone write for him and asked my great-grandmother to come and bring the children. What the letter didn't include, and if you haven't read the book, this is a spoiler, so cover your ears like that, okay? Next slide, please. Oh, this is where they went through immigration. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention was that they came in 1886, and Ellis Island didn't open until 1892. So this was prior to Ellis Island, but similar situation. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, they arrived in Calumet. But because my great-grandfather was illiterate and he didn't write his own letter, we don't know if he did it intentionally or the man who wrote the letter for him left it out unintentionally. But in any event, when my great-grandmother arrived with her children, she was told that she would be running a boarding house for 12 other minors. So you can imagine how surprising that must have been after that arduous journey and having one idea in mind and then facing something else. Next slide, please. So these are pictures of miners. This picture is also in the book. She didn't have all these people in her house as boarders, but she had 12 of them. And if you look closely, I like the detail of how they were dressed. You see the helmets that they're wearing? The mines were so dark underground that they had to wear a lantern hat so they could see. This was before electricity. Eventually, the mines got electrified, but at this time they did not. And you notice their lunch pails. You see the buckets on the ground? That's where they carried their lunch. And they took that down into the mine. And usually it was filled with a pasty or two. And that would help keep them warm down in the mines. Next slide, please. There. Oh, can we go back one, Sarah? I think there's the miners on the moving staircase. Let's see it. Not there?
There doesn't seem to be anything in between.
Another picture of the miners.
No, there's an empty slide there.
Oh, shoot. That's too bad. Okay. Well, mining was a very dangerous job. And in the best of circumstances, the miners would work usually in pairs so that if one of them got injured, the other one could go for help. When the mines became more competitive with the mines out west, a drill was introduced called the one-man drill, which was supposed to increase production, but it was a very dangerous machine. It was called the Widowmaker, because if it slipped, the miner was alone and there would be no way to get word for help. So it was very controversial and in fact led to the strike in 1913, but this is before that time. Next slide, please. And of all this effort was made for copper. We still use copper today. Next slide, please. Copper, as you probably know, copper has many uses: pots and pans, wire insulation, machinery bearings, pipes, plumbing, and automobiles for gutters. And all this was because there was a demand and the mining companies needed a lot of cheap labor. So that is why people like my great-grandfather were able to come and work in those mines. Okay, thank you, Sarah. So my great-grandfather was one of the lucky miners because he did not suffer a terrible injury. He didn't lose a limb. My great-grandmother was able to cure him and he didn't go blind. And so they took the savings they had and together with what my great-grandmother made with her boarding house residents, and my great-grandfather was able to leave the mines and they opened up a saloon. And it was a little different back in those days. My great-grandmother already knew how to cook for a lot of people. So it was really more of a social place. And every ethnic group had one that was for their people. And so my great-grandfather was the first Croatian in Michigan. But as he stayed, they brought more family members over. And so as the community grew, it became a place where people would come for advice and socialization about how to live in this new country. And as you see, he became a citizen, and all of his kids went on to become citizens too. Okay, so I've got scrapbooks, I've got research boxes. I finally decided that this story was just not going to let me go, that it was just demanding to be told, and I had to do something about it. So I started to write. Next slide, please. And write and research. And I have many drafts I can show you. Next slide. Many more. Yeah. So it takes a lot of work to put a book together, but I really love doing it. And when I got an acceptance from Wayne State University Press, I was really overjoyed. It was a little bit bittersweet because my mother, who had been such a part of this, had just died, and my daughter was about to get married. And there's a lot of work to do between an acceptance of a manuscript and the final end of it. And during that same time, I had to get ready for my daughter's wedding. So it was a little bit like, Anyway, we managed. The first cover that they showed me, this was the first. And this was such a nice part of working with Wayne State. They allowed me to have some input into the cover design. So I thought it was very attractive, and it certainly looked like copper, but I thought it just doesn't seem to be as enticing for a child. So then we tried another one, and the designer tried this, and I'm like, oh, that's nice too. We see the herbs and we see remedies for, bottle remedies, but I felt I was still missing something. So third time's the charm. And I thought this really captured what I was trying to say in the book. It shows Mihaela. It shows plants all throughout her head. She was thinking about these things. It shows a bee, which is featured in the book, and we were all very happy with it. Okay, so let's see, next one. So I was very happy that the book got published, happy that I got a couple of awards, and happy that I could share this story with you. And that's good. One more, yeah. And that is my great-grandmother. That is Teresa, who is Mama in the book. And I owe her and all my family a great debt of gratitude for all the hard work that they did so that we could be here today. So next slide. And if you're interested in any kinds of places that you might want to look about your family history, these are some things that you could try out. And I'm sure that Miss Sarah has other wonderful resources that she could suggest for you too. So that's a little bit about me and my book. And I can't see if there are any questions yet because of the PowerPoint, but let's see. Okay, I see a couple of young people. I don't see everybody's faces, but I see some people are here, and I'd love to talk with you some more if you have anything you'd like to ask me. Oh, I was going to read too. Should I do that first?
Did you want to give your voice a little bit of a break, or do you want?
Sure. If people want to ask me some questions, that'd be great.
I had one question earlier. Barbara was kind enough to come and join. The Peter White Library has been running a book club with her book in conjunction with this program. And I asked earlier today where Barbara is currently living.
I'm in Washington, D.C. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, but my husband had a job offer many, many years ago. And so we thought we'd give it a try. And I still go back to Michigan very frequently. My brothers are still there. I have nieces and nephews. And we went up north last summer. We had a big family reunion, and I can't wait to come back once we can all travel again.
Hi, Alice. Would you like to ask a question? I can't hear you. I'm not sure why I can't hear you.
I can't hear her either.
Can we maybe put it in the chat box? Oh, Zoom. You guys want to work on your chat box? Maybe we'll see if somebody else has a question and we'll get back to your guys'. Anne, hi Anne.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining us, Barbara. I was wondering, how did you decide to tell the story from Mihaela's point of view? Like, what made you choose a young girl?
Thank you, Anne. That's a nice question. I really struggled with it for a while. I wrote from the mother's point of view, but you're not supposed to do that for kids' books. I kind of had wrestled a lot with Mama because I'm a mama myself, and it was like I could see her point of view. But I also wanted to sort of tap into my 11-year-old self because that is one of the golden ages of reading, and I loved crawling into books at that age. And so I thought, I just think this is the right character to tell the story. And she could sort of relate to her mother, and she just pulled it together. It's funny, sometimes when you're writing, you try different characters and they actually kind of talk to you. They kind of take over. And after trying it a few times, Mihaela became the boss.
Harlow, we'll get back to you in a minute, but we're going to do Alice's question first, okay? So Alice asks, how many times have you been to Croatia and what are the best Croatian foods?
Oh, wow. I've only been once. We were supposed to go back last summer when the pandemic hit. So that was really unfortunate, but I hope to go back again. My favorite Croatian food, well, I think it has to be povatica, if I named one. And I don't know if you've seen the recipes in the back of the book, but it is a delicious kind of a sweet bread that is so wonderful. And I think my second favorite would be sarma, which is another recipe in the book. And that's stuffed cabbage leaves. But they also have wonderful fish. Since it's right on the coast across from Italy, it's very Mediterranean in its food. And so there's a lot of fish and fresh vegetables. And they do a really good job with simple grilled fish, just like Michigan.
I should share, one of our families in our book club made povatica with your recipe last week.
Did it taste wonderful?
It looked wonderful. I couldn't taste it, but no, they said it tasted quite great. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Harlow, did you have a question?
I forgot it.
That's okay. We can
If I
come back.
remember, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I have a few things, since I see we have some young readers with us tonight. I brought a couple of things that I thought you might enjoy. Have you read, if you've read the book, then you'll know that Mama does, and Mihaela and her brothers have to help with the wash, that the miners live there and they come back in their dirty clothes, and she has to do a lot of laundry. And this is how they had to do it in the old days. This is a scrub board. Have you ever seen one of these? So it was really hard. I mean, now we have a washing machine where, you know, soaks the clothes and moves it around and gets the dirt off. But in those days, you had to really scrub it. Sometimes people used to use these in a band, but it's not much fun when you're really scrubbing clothes with this. And I showed you a picture of copper on the PowerPoint, but I also have a piece. This is from a real Michigan copper mine. And it doesn't look very pretty. Here's a piece that looks a little bit more cleaned up. But this is the raw material that comes out of the rock. And so you saw that picture of the drill. That's how they had to get the copper out of the rock. Have you ever been to a copper mine, anybody? Have you ever gone up to the Keweenaw? They have a few that are open for tours. They're not operating anymore. It's a fun trip. Maybe someday you could do that. Have a question?
Yeah, did you immigrate to Croatia or were you born in Michigan?
No, I was born in Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah. my great grandmother and grandfather came here first, so I was born here.
Okay. Also, where did you get the copper?
I bought it online. I have been to the copper mines up there, but it's a little bit heavy. So, you know, when you're traveling, you don't want to carry a lot of things. So I knew that they were there and that they had this. So I wrote to them and said, I'd like to buy a little piece of copper, please.
So one question that our group had last week or the week before, we were reading the chapters about the Tamburitsa, and I was unable, well, it was a very fast search, but I was unable to find any pictures of a Tamburitsa.
Oh, now I get one for the next time. I don't think I
Okay.
have it in hand, but yeah, there, it looks like a gourd shaped kind of stringed instrument, like a funny guitar. It's got a little bit more of a round bottom, but it can also have a more angular shape. There are quite a few different styles, and they all fall into the category of tambourines. I see a question up here. What kinds of things do you keep in mind when writing for younger readers? What other writings are you proud of? I'll start with the first one. This is from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca, for that question. I try to remember how I felt when I was a young reader, and I try to make sure that I respect how smart kids are, that I don't want to think they can't get something. I remember this with my own children too. Kids are really smart. They really know what's going on and they understand a lot. So I put things in that I thought kids would recognize. You know, sometimes it's hard to do things. Sometimes you don't succeed. Sometimes you make mistakes. Mihaela made a really big mistake. But I wanted everybody to know that that's part of being human. And if you're lucky, you'll have good people in your family or your life that will help you when you make a mistake. And you can learn from it. So the second part of that question, what other writings am I proud of? Well, I mentioned I was a media producer. I worked for National Geographic for a while, and I was a producer for their website. And I started the job in November, and I was given an assignment that had to be done right away, and it had to be finished by February for Black History Month. And it was kind of scary because, you know, you have to be careful how you represent other people's cultures and races. But I got it done, and it won a American Library Association Notable Website Award. So I was kind of proud of that. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, continue.
I've written some other articles. I've written some nonfiction for magazines. I've written fiction for Highlights magazine, and I'm working on some other things right now.
Yeah, so we actually have a question from Ann Johnson just asking, are you writing anything new?
I am. I am writing a picture book biography, but I've been told I'm not supposed to talk about it yet. So, so I'm sorry. I'll be happy to share details as I'm allowed to. Oh, here's a nice comment from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. It says, I loved how forgiving Mama was after the bee incident. Well, we all hope for someone like that in our lives, I think. It's so easy to make mistakes. And if you try hard and someone's there to say, you know, you can do it, it'll be okay. It just helps children, especially, I think. If I could put a name on the condition of the father's eyes. Well, we were talking about that earlier today. There are two theories, and I don't have proof. The first is that he was working in the mines, and he developed this eye disease as he was working in the mines or so we think. But he wrote to her after he had arrived and was working in the mines. So it could have been some kind of inflammatory illness caused by mine dust and dirt. As you saw that drill, there's tremendous amounts of stuff flying around in the air. And I don't think they had goggles in those days. So collecting all that stuff in your eyes would be really bad. The second possibility is that he might have had something, but I don't think so when he left. There's an eye disease called trachoma, but that a lot of people in poor countries can have. It's still a problem in a lot of third world countries today. It's easily cured, but it has to be treated. But since they went through the immigration station, and Mihaela mentions how this happened to her, that time they actually peeled back your eyelids to check for that disease. So that's why it's probably more likely that he had an irritation from the mines, because he would have been checked to get through the immigration before he could get into the United States. If they had detected trachoma, they would have held him back. They might not have sent him back, but they would have not let him into the country at that point until it was resolved. Harlow, have you got a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How did they peel back your eyelids and did it hurt?
I think it probably wasn't very comfortable. I don't have a shoe button hook. I wish I did. In the olden days, sometimes people wore shoes that had to be buttoned. And in order to make that easier, there was something called a shoe button hook. And from what I've read in my research, that's what they used. There's probably a better medical tool. I'm sure there's a better medical tool today to check. But basically, you roll your eyelid back and you look, and I guess the situation is apparent under your eyelid. Let's see if I have other things I can show you here. Oh, well, how many people have copper pots or pans or anything in their house that they can find that's made out of copper? Yeah, and are you a cook? Yeah. Rebecca, you got copper? Here's one of my pots.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I don't use it very much, you can tell. It was a gift, and somehow when you get a gift, you don't want to ruin it, right? I only bring it out for company, so yeah. Right.
Did you want to move on to reading a little bit?
Oh,
and maybe
sure,
we'll
yes.
have a few more questions yet. After?
Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to read from the middle of the book, because I think I told you enough about how the book begins, but if you want a little more, we can talk about that later too, okay? This is from chapter 13, Bees. Cries rang out from the backyard. Mihaela ran through the cabin and out the kitchen door. Mama held Blaze on her lap. A wet cloth lay across his forehead while she used a thin piece of bark to scrape welts on his face and neck. Lucas stood nearby, tears streaming down his face. He cradled one swollen and red arm with his other. Mama, Mihaela cried, what happened? Bees. Mama started to massage Blaze's chest as he wheezed noisily. The ball hit a hive. They've both been stung many times. Blaze is having trouble breathing. Blaze's face was swollen and his lips were tinged with blue. Oh no. Mihaela looked from one brother to the other. Luca moaned, lots of stings. His right arm was an angry crimson. Mihaela could barely stand to see them. She was supposed to have been looking after her brothers. I don't have anything to treat Blaze, Mama said. The herbs used for bee stings had been lost at the train station. Mihaela dug into her pockets and pulled out everything she had just found in the woods. I picked some herbs and leaves. Maybe one of these will help. She handed the plants to her mother and looked more closely at Luca. He was covered with fiery welts. Do you have a question, Harlow? Okay.
Did something like the bee stings happen to your grandpa or grandma?
Well, I've heard stories that it did. Yeah. Mama first chose the wild onions. She split the small white bulbs with her fingers and rubbed them gently over the worst of Blaze's stings. Then she tore up the leaves with the veins, the plantain plant, and gently pushed the pieces inside Blaze's mouth. Try to chew those, Blaze. He made a face, but did as he was told. Mihaela, get me some water. Mihaela grabbed the bucket and sprinted to the pump. She raced back. Mama tore up more of the green leaves and chewed them herself, then stuck the pulp on the stings. She chewed more and added water to make a paste, then applied the paste all over the boys' welts. After a few minutes, she put her ear against their chests. Blaze whimpered, but his breathing had improved a little. Here, Luca, you need to chew this too. Mama helped him with pieces of the plant. Let's get the boys inside. Mama picked up Blaze while holding Luca by the hand. They both need to stay quiet. Help me to take them to their beds. Mihaela was eager to do anything she could. Mama propped up Blaze with pillows behind his back. Mihaela, sit right by him while I check on Luca's stings. Keep feeding him small amounts of the plant. Mihaela held one of Blaze's hands in hers while she gave him more of the plant. Try to chew this, Blaze. His lower lip trembled. Hurts. Mihaela nodded and patted a part of his hand that wasn't swollen. She glanced over at Luca and saw that his left arm still held many stingers. Mama was trying to remove the stingers by scraping him off with a thin piece of wood. He winced as Mama removed one after another. Mihaela lifted up Blaze's shirt to check his back. I think there are a few more stingers left here. She took the piece of wood from Mama and removed them. That's good, Mihaela. I'm going to make more of that poultice. I'll be right back. Mihaela finished checking Blaze, then walked over to Luca's bed. I'm sorry you got stung. I should have been there. Luca shook his head. The hive was hidden in a tree. The ball hit it and the bees got mad. Bad luck. Why did they attack Blaze so much? He was right next to the hive when it fell from the tree. They swarmed him. I ran over to try and make them go away. Poor Blaze. He got more stings than I did. Mihaela looked at all the welts on Blaze. There were several on his neck, some on his ears, and a big red welt just visible under the brown hair on his head. Mama got most of the stingers out of him first because he couldn't breathe. Mihaela started to cry. Oh, Luca, I feel awful for both of you. Mama returned with more of the poultice and 2 glasses of water. Mihaela, why are you crying? I'm sorry about what happened. Maybe if I'd watched the boys, they wouldn't have been stung. No use talking like that. I am concerned that you went off alone, though, without telling me first. Remember, your father said there could be bears. Mihaela shuddered. Mama applied the rest of the poultice to Blaze and Lucas and then gave them each a glass of water. She stayed until both were breathing normally. Just lay still now, boys. Mama turned to Mihaela. Come, we need to talk. Mihaela followed her mother into the kitchen. The heavy chair made a scraping sound as she pulled it out and sat down. She didn't know what Mama was going to say. Mama went to one of the kitchen drawers and returned with her pen, the ink bottle, and a piece of paper. She eased onto another chair. Mihaela, the plants we've been using for Papa aren't working. We need to find something to help his eyes right away. He told me this morning he can barely see. The oil we got at the store wasn't really what I had hoped it would be. Mihaela's heart skipped a beat. Mama's face was drawn and taut. Poor Papa. The plants you found today are very good, but still not what will cure him. I can't leave the boys now to go search, but you can. She sketched quickly. Did you see either of these on your walk? She handed the paper to Mihaela. Mihaela looked at the drawings. I'm not sure. 2 plants? Yes. Back home, goldenrod grew in open fields. Mama pointed to the first picture. It has yellow flowers in large clusters on single woody stems. Muskmallow might be along the road or at the edge of the woods. Mihaela saw that the second plant had 5 petals in a funnel-shaped flower. Is it pink or white? Either color. Mihaela picked up the paper and put it in her pocket. Should I go now? Are the boys all right? What about me helping you get dinner ready? I think the boys are recovering. Thank God you found those plants. She shook her head. I'll manage with dinner. Take a pot and use a stick to hit it if you hear animal sounds that worry you. Make as much noise as you can to scare things away. Finding these herbs is the only thing that will save Papa's eyes. So that's a little bit of some of the trials that Mihaela faced. She really had a couple of really tough situations that she had to work through. And this is what she might have had to do when she was out looking for those the plants. So the bears, because one thing you can do about bears is you try to scare them away with noise. And that's true. Anybody else have any thoughts, questions, more discussion about the book? Have any of you read the book and want to ask me anything else about what's in it? How about the pictures? Are you able to look at many of the pictures?
So Rebecca asks, while you were conducting your research, was there anything you came across that really surprised you?
Some little things that turned out to be really important. When my mother told me the story about when they came to America, she placed my grandfather's age at about two years old. But when I went to the National Archives and I was doing research about getting his age right, I was able to locate his selective service card. He had to register for the draft for World War I. And so that birth date then let me kind of cross-reference me to the ship's log. So I could have two resources that confirmed his age. And that allowed me then to place the story in the right year. And a lot of things flowed from that. So that was almost a keystone piece of information. And one of the things that I enjoyed about researching was that I would write and then I would learn something. I try to do most of the research ahead of time, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And I'd uncover one thing and I'd realize I have to go back and research something else. So after I thought I was done, before I submitted my manuscript, I spent an entire year looking at all my facts and sort of double checking and creating a bibliography. And some of you kids may not be interested in this now, but at some point in your life, you may appreciate a bibliography because it sort of helps you realize if a book is authentic or accurate. And if you've got a lot of research that you've documented, a publisher would also probably be more willing to think that the information is accurate. So that's where I went down the rabbit hole. When I cross-referenced all these sources and things that I thought I knew, then I would have to go back and revise the manuscript. So it wasn't just one thing, it was several little things, but they all made up a big part of the project.
I think we have a question from Harlow and then one from Alice in the chat. So go ahead, Harlow.
Okay, Harlow.
I have a question, and did you have any brothers and sisters? If so, did you base them on Mihaela's brothers?
Yes. Oh, Harlow, thank you for that question. Yes, I do. I have two brothers. And I was in the middle. So I wasn't the big sister, but I was a big sister to my younger brother. So I based a lot of the characters on people I knew. And at one point I was writing it, my son was smaller and he had a little friend. So I thought a lot about his little friend. It was his friend's little brother for Blaze. So, it's nice to have things, as I said early on, it's hard to write from a blank page, but if you have stories and if you have people around you, you can draw your ideas and then add the real facts in too. And then let's see the ship. Okay. Well, I think I showed you a picture of the ship earlier, and I've got another picture here. I think I can show you again. Let's see. It was a big steamer, and it wasn't like the ships that people go on today for fun, not Carnival cruisers or whatever, any of those big ship, what do you call it, cruise lines. It was a ship that held a lot of people. And if you didn't have a lot of money, you didn't get to stay in a very nice part of the ship. The food wasn't very good. You didn't get a lot of fresh air. The men and the women were separated. So at least the little boys were able to stay with the mother. People slept very close together. So there were a lot of snoring and other sounds at night. The diesel smell of the ship was pretty bad. A lot of people would get sick. It was rough, and it was not an easy thing to do. And I often thought about how hard it would be to make that trip and believe that you were going to go home. That was the other thing. They all believed it was just a temporary trip, that another brother was supposed to replace my great-grandfather, and his turn would be up and he'd get to go back to the Croatian farm. So it's really a story about unexpected immigration, how when people come trying to make something a little bit better in their lives, other things can happen that they don't expect. And they ended up staying and becoming citizens. But I'm sure it was so hard for my great-grandmother, thinking she'd go home. When she ever went back, she never saw her other relatives again. So there's a lot of stories that go into making our country what it is today. And it's, I'm very happy that I'm part of that story, because I really benefited from their efforts. And I sort of wanted to say thank you to them, even though they're not here. I wanted their story to be heard. Let's see, I don't think I can find another question, Harlow.
Yeah, how long did it take for the ship ride?
Well, the ship was probably at sea at between 7 and 10 days. It depended on the weather. I suppose I could really get the exact date if I went back and looked at my records of departure and arrival. Sometimes conditions on the water will, make things faster or slower. They also had to do this overland trip between Croatia and Germany that added to the length of time. So you remember, Croatia is over here by Italy, but instead of going this way, they had to go up here through Germany. And this was a big port that took a lot of people from Europe to America. Sometimes they have to wait a couple of days when they got to the ship before they could even get on it. So I don't have all those exact details, but I would say it was at least 7 to 10 days.
And how many days was it altogether?
Well, then you have to add on the time between New York and Upper Peninsula of Michigan. In those days, there wasn't a Mackinac Bridge. So they would have had to take trains from New York across Ohio, and then across Indiana, and then up through Wisconsin to get up to the Upper Peninsula. So that would have taken at least 3 or 4 days, maybe more, all day and all night. I mean, they didn't get off and go to a hotel or anything. So lots of work, huh? Have you ever been on a long trip?
Yeah, I went to Florida.
Did you drive?
Wait, where did we go?
Austria.
When I was a baby, I went to Austria.
Ooh, that sounds nice. You remember anything about it?
No, I was a baby.
Well, if you've
Yeah.
ever been on a long car trip, you probably realize how hard it is to stay sitting for a long, long time, huh?
Yeah, we took a plane there, I
Oh,
think.
that's good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, we are coming up on an hour, so please, if anybody had any questions that you wanted to ask, you can either ask in person or on chat. There are some, if you have not had a chance yet, there is on the Two Books, Two Communities website, which I believe is hosted through NMU, a video that was made of pasty making. I know the recipe is slightly different from Barbara's, but many people have their own recipes for those pasties. So that is something cool to check out if you would like. Anybody else from the committee want to chime in on anything from the Two Books, Two Communities thing? Yes, Harlow.
This is kind of
Sorry.
from the first time I was on, but I lost 2 pasty eyeballs and I didn't finish it.
Oh, I can
Yeah.
help you with that.
Mhm.
Miss Sarah and her team at the library put together some really wonderful materials. Some of you have used them, I think, already, but there's a nice section on wildflowers and herbs. I believe there was a link to that, which is really great. And is the Jeopardy game going to be available? I guess I could see it taped. Is that right, Sarah? That was fun.
Yeah, and I certainly could provide it to the Two Books, Two Communities to put on the website. We made up a Jeopardy game that we played today. That was quite a bit of fun.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay, Anne did share the link. Thank you, Anne. So if you are interested in going to the it's called One Book, but this year Two Books, Two Communities website to see other resources for that video, the link is right there in the comments.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight and inviting me to join you. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me to meet with some of the people in the country the copper country that I love. And I hope you all have a great fall and winter and stay healthy. And thank you again for thinking about my book.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. And we have been having so much fun at the book club also with your book. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.